She rejected my proposal so gently that I smiled through the pain and disappeared from her life forever. But when her wealthy family tried to destroy my business, I discovered their explosive family secret. Now I had the power to obliterate their reputation. The question was, would I use it? My name is Rodney Blackwell. I'm 40 years old, and I own a tattoo parlor called Ink and Iron in downtown Portland, Oregon. It's not the biggest shop in the city, but it's mine. I built it from nothing over the past 12 years, one tattoo at a time. My clients trust me with their stories, their pain, their celebrations, all permanently etched into their skin. Ironic how I could read everyone else's story, but miss the plot twist coming in my own. Scarlett Pemberton walked into my shop 3 years ago for a small butterfly tattoo on her wrist. She was different from my usual clients, polished, sophisticated, wearing clothes that probably cost more than most people make in a week. Her family owned half the commercial real estate in Portland, but she didn't act entitled like most rich folks. She was genuine, or at least I thought she was. We started dating 6 months after that first appointment. She'd bring me coffee during my lunch breaks, hang around the shop chatting with my regulars. My business partner, Jake, always said she seemed too good for a guy like me, but I figured he was just being protective. Jake's been my best friend since high school, and he's seen me get burned before. For 2.5 years, things were solid. Sure, we moved in different circles. Her friends were lawyers and investment bankers, while mine were artists and musicians. But opposites attract, right? She'd drag me to fancy charity galas where I'd feel like a fish out of water in my borrowed suit, and I'd take her to underground music shows where she'd actually seem to enjoy herself. The problem started about 6 months ago. Subtle at first, canceled dates, shorter phone calls, less time spent at my place. When I asked about it, she'd blame work stress or family obligations. Her father had been pushing her to take on more responsibility in the family business, so it made sense. But then her college friend Rachel got engaged to some hedge fund manager, and everything changed. Suddenly, every conversation somehow circled back to weddings, engagement rings, or what it meant to settle down properly. She'd make little comments about how Rachel's fiancé had proposed with a ring that cost more than most people's cars, or how another friend's boyfriend had rented out an entire restaurant for his proposal. I started saving money. Not because of her hints, well, not entirely, but because I genuinely wanted to marry her. Despite everything, I loved Scarlett Pemberton. I loved her laugh, the way she'd scrunch her nose when she was thinking, how she'd always order dessert even when she said she wouldn't. I wanted to build a life with her. What I didn't know was that her parents had already decided I wasn't good enough for their daughter. The engagement ring shopping started in March. I've been putting aside $300 every month since New Year's, and by spring I had enough for something decent. Not the 5-figure rock that Scarlett's friends were flashing around, but something with real stones and craftsmanship. I went to Morrison's Jewelry downtown, a family-owned place that had been around since the 1940s. The owner, Frank Morrison, was this old-school guy who believed in quality over flash. He showed me rings in my price range, explaining the differences between settings and stone cuts like he was teaching a masterclass. "You want something that'll last," Frank told me, adjusting his glasses as he pulled out a tray of engagement rings. "These young folks today, they think bigger is always better. But your girl strikes me as someone who appreciates craftsmanship." I brought Scarlett to Morrison's once before to get her watch repaired, so Frank remembered her. He was right. She did appreciate quality. The ring I chose was a classic solitaire with a 1-carat center stone, flanked by 2 smaller diamonds. It wasn't the biggest ring in the case, but it was beautiful and well-made. "She'll love it," Frank assured me as he sized the ring. "A woman who appreciates the finer things will see the quality in this piece." The problem was, I didn't know that Scarlett's parents had already started their campaign against me. Her mother, Patricia Pemberton, had apparently been showing her pictures of suitable young men from their social circle. Lawyers, doctors, investment bankers, guys who drove BMWs and belonged to country clubs. Jay tried to warn me. He'd overheard a conversation at the coffee shop near my parlor between Scarlett and one of her friends. Something about her parents threatening to cut her off financially if she didn't come to her senses about our relationship. "Maybe you should talk to her about it," Jake suggested one evening as we were closing up the shop. "See where her head's really at before you pop the question." But I was stubborn. I convinced myself that love would conquer all, that once I showed Scarlett how serious I was about our future, everything else would fall into place. I even started planning the perfect proposal, dinner at Meridian, the fancy restaurant where we'd had our first official date, followed by a walk through Tom McCall Waterfront Park where she loved to watch the sunset over the Willamette River. Looking back, I realized I was setting myself up for the biggest fall of my life. But at the time, I was convinced that the ring would change everything, that it would prove to her parents I was serious about taking care of their daughter, despite what they thought about my profession. I picked up the ring on a Thursday afternoon in April. Frank wished me luck as I left his shop, and I felt like I was carrying my entire future in that small velvet box. If only I'd known what Scarlett's family had planned for me. The first real warning came from an unexpected source. Marcus Thompson, one of my longtime clients who worked as a private investigator. He'd been coming to my shop for years, adding to a full sleeve that told the story of his military service. During his appointment in late April, he mentioned something that made my blood run cold. "Hey, Rodney," Marcus said as I worked on shading around his shoulder. "You know that girl you've been seeing? The Pemberton family." I looked up from my work. "Yes, Scarlett." "What?" Marcus shifted uncomfortably in the chair. "I probably shouldn't say anything, but I've been hired to do some background checks lately. The Pembertons are asking a lot of questions about local business owners." The tattoo gun felt heavy in my hand. "What kind of questions?" "Financial records, credit reports, criminal history, the works. They're being thorough," Marcus said, his voice careful and professional. "I can't tell you who they're investigating specifically, but just watch your back, man." That evening, I confronted Scarlett directly. We were at her apartment, and she was cooking dinner, something she rarely did anymore. I waited until we sat down to eat before bringing it up. "Scarlett, is there something going on with your family that I should know about?" She froze with her fork halfway to her mouth. "What do you mean?" "I heard they might be having me investigated." "Is that true?" The color drained from her face. For a moment, I thought she might deny it, but then her shoulders sagged. "My parents are protective. They worry about my choices. So they are investigating me." Scarlett set down her fork and looked me in the eyes. "My father thinks you're not stable enough. He's concerned about your business, your lifestyle." I felt my jaw tighten. "My lifestyle?" "The tattoo parlor, your friends, the fact that you rent instead of own property," she said, her voice getting smaller with each word. "He thinks I deserve someone more established." I stood up from the table, my appetite gone. "And what do you think, Scarlett?" She didn't answer right away, and that silence told me everything I needed to know. 3 days later, I got my answer about what the Pemberton family really thought of me. Patricia Pemberton herself showed up at my shop on a Tuesday afternoon, walking in like she owned the place. I was working on a client when she arrived, but the look on her face made it clear this wasn't a social visit. "Mrs. Pemberton," I said, setting down my equipment and asking my client if we could take a short break. "This is unexpected." She surveyed my shop with obvious distaste, taking in the artwork on the walls, the sound of classic rock playing from the speakers, the general atmosphere that was probably as foreign to her as Mars. "Mr. Blackwell, I think we need to have a conversation," she said, her voice crisp and businesslike. "About your relationship with my daughter." I gestured toward my office in the back. "Let's talk privately." Once we were alone, she didn't waste time with pleasantries. "I'll be direct. You're not right for Scarlett. You're not in her league, and you never will be." I felt my temper rising, but kept my voice level. "With all due respect, Mrs. Pemberton, that's not your decision to make." "Isn't it?" she asked, raising an eyebrow. "Do you know what Scarlett stands to inherit? The properties, the trust funds, the business interests? She needs a husband who can navigate that world, not someone who draws pictures on people for a living." "I run a successful business," I replied firmly. "I employ 3 people, pay my taxes, contribute to the community." She laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Mr. Blackwell, the charity gala we attended last month raised more money in one evening than your little shop makes in a year. Scarlett deserves a partner who can match her social standing." I stood up, my patience finally exhausted. "Lady, I don't care how much money your family has. I love your daughter, and I thought she loved me." "Love," Patricia said, practically spitting the word. "Love doesn't pay for private schools or country club memberships, or the lifestyle Scarlett is accustomed to. Maybe you should let Scarlett decide what she values." I shot back. Patricia Pemberton smiled then, and it was the coldest expression I'd ever seen. "Oh, Mr. Blackwell, she already has." That night, Scarlett came to my apartment. One look at her face told me that her mother had filled her in on our conversation. We both knew what was coming, but neither of us wanted to be the first to say it. "Rodney," she began, her voice barely above a whisper. "Don't," I said, holding up my hand. "Let me ask you something first. Do you love me?" She nodded, tears forming in her eyes. "But you're going to choose them anyway." Another nod. I felt something break inside my chest, but I kept my voice steady. "Then there's nothing left to say." Friday night arrived with spring rain pattering against the windows of Meridian Restaurant. I'd chosen this place for our first official date 3 years ago, and now I was hoping it would be where we'd start the next chapter of our lives together. The ring box felt like it was burning a hole in my jacket pocket. Scarlett looked beautiful in a black dress I'd never seen before, but there was something distant in her eyes. She picked at her food, made small talk about work, avoided looking directly at me. I could tell she knew something was coming. "Scarlett," I said as the waiter cleared our dinner plates, "let's take a walk through the park. Like we used to." She nodded without enthusiasm, and we walked in silence to Tom McCall Waterfront Park. The rain had stopped, leaving everything clean and fresh. City lights reflected off the wet pavement as we found our usual spot overlooking the Willamette River. I took a deep breath and pulled out the ring box. "Scarlett, I know things have been complicated lately with your family, but I love you. I want to build a life with you." I dropped to one knee, opened the box, and looked up at her face. "Will you marry me?" The silence stretched between us like a chasm. Scarlett stared down at the ring, then at me, then back at the ring. Her eyes filled with tears, but they weren't tears of joy. "Rodney," she whispered, her voice breaking, "I can't." The words hit me like a physical blow. "What do you mean you can't?" "I mean I can't marry you," she said, taking a step backward. "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry." I stayed on one knee for a moment longer, processing what had just happened. Then I slowly stood up, closed the ring box, and put it back in my pocket. The rejection was so gentle, so soft, that somehow it hurt worse than if she'd screamed at me. "Is it because of your parents?" I asked, my voice surprisingly steady. She nodded, unable to speak. I felt something break inside my chest, but I managed to smile. It probably looked more like a grimace, but I was determined not to let her see how completely she'd just destroyed me. "I understand," I said quietly. "Rodney, please." "No," I said, holding up my hand. "You've made your choice. I respect that." I turned and walked away without looking back, disappearing from her life forever. Each step felt like I was leaving pieces of myself behind on that wet pavement, but I kept walking. My pride was all I had left, and I wasn't going to lose that too. Behind me, I could hear her calling my name, but I didn't stop. Some bridges, once burned, can never be rebuilt. I didn't go home that night. Instead, I drove to my shop and sat in the dark, staring at the flash art on the walls. Every piece told someone's story: triumph, loss, love, heartbreak. Now I had my own story to add to the collection, but this one wouldn't be going on anyone's skin. Jake found me there the next morning, still wearing my wrinkled dress shirt from the night before. "Jesus, Rodney," he said, looking at my face. "She said no, didn't she?" I nodded, not trusting my voice yet. Jake grabbed 2 cups of coffee from a machine and sat down across from me. "Talk to me, man." She rejected me so gently that I smiled through the pain and walked away forever. I said, the words coming out flat and emotionless. "Her parents won. End of story. What are you going to do?" I thought about it for a moment. "I'm going to work. I'm going to focus on my business, my art, my life. And I'm going to pretend that the last 3 years never happened." But pretending turned out to be impossible. By Monday morning, word had somehow gotten out about the failed proposal. I suspected Patricia Pemberton had made sure the story circulated through Portland social circles, probably as a warning to other women about what happens when you date beneath your station. My phone started ringing with calls from people I barely knew, all wanting to express their sympathy or get the gossip firsthand. I stopped answering after the 5th call. The worst part was the pity. Clients would come in for their appointments and try to be extra nice, speaking in hushed tones like someone had died. In a way, someone had. The version of myself that believed love could conquer class differences was gone forever. Marcus Thompson came in for his touch-up work on Wednesday and didn't mention the proposal at all. Instead, he told me about a mutual friend who was opening a new shop in Seattle and looking for an experienced tattoo artist to partner with. Sometimes a change of scenery is exactly what a man needs, Marcus said as I worked on his arm. Fresh start, new city, leave the past behind. The idea had merit. Portland suddenly felt small and suffocating, full of memories I couldn't escape. Every restaurant, every street corner, every coffee shop held reminders of Scarlett. But running away felt like admitting defeat, and I wasn't ready to do that yet. I'd built something here, a reputation, a business, a community of artists and clients who respected my work. Walking away from all of that because some rich family thought I wasn't good enough felt like letting them win twice. Instead, I made a different decision. I was going to stay and build something even bigger. I was going to prove that Rodney Blackwell didn't need their approval or their daughter to succeed. The ring went back to Frank Morrison, who refunded most of my money without asking questions. The cash went into expanding my shop, buying better equipment, hiring another artist. If Scarlett wanted a man with money and status, I'd show her what real success looked like. The humiliation campaign started 2 weeks after the failed proposal. I was getting ready to open the shop on a Tuesday morning when Jake burst through the front door, holding his phone with a grim expression. "You need to see this," he said, showing me the screen. It was Portland Society page blog, Rose City Elite, featuring a full article about Scarlett's narrow escape from an unsuitable suitor. The piece included details about my business, my background, even quotes from unnamed sources describing the proposal as desperate and presumptuous. How the hell did they get this information? I asked, scrolling through the article that painted me as some kind of gold-digging opportunist. "Gets worse," Jake said, pulling up another tab. "Check out the comments." The comments section was a cesspool of classist garbage. People I'd never met were discussing my financial situation, my tattoo parlor, even speculating about my character based on nothing but Patricia Pemberton's carefully planted narrative. By noon, the story had spread to other local blogs and social media. My business phone started ringing with prank calls, and someone had posted fake negative reviews on our Google listing. The message was clear: cross the Pemberton family, and they'll destroy your reputation. Marcus Thompson showed up that afternoon for an unscheduled visit. "Rodney, we need to talk about security," he said, his PI instincts kicking in. "This kind of public shaming campaign can attract dangerous attention." "You think I'm in physical danger?" "I think you're dealing with people who have unlimited resources and no conscience," Marcus replied. "They've already shown they're willing to destroy your reputation." "What's next?" As if on cue, my landlord called. Someone had filed a complaint with the city about my shop's permits, claiming we weren't properly zoned for the type of business we were running. It was complete nonsense. We've been operating legally for 12 years, but it would require lawyers and court appearances to resolve. "They're playing dirty," I told Jake after hanging up. "Really dirty." That evening, Iris Pemberton showed up at my shop just as I was closing. Scarlett's younger sister looked nervous but determined. She'd always been the rebel of the family, studying art at Portland State instead of business like her parents wanted. "Rodney, I'm so sorry about what my family is doing," Iris said, glancing around to make sure we were alone. "This isn't right." "Why are you here, Iris?" "Because I know things about my family that would shock you," she said quietly. "Things that could stop this campaign against you if you knew how to use them." I studied her face, seeing something I'd never noticed before, a resemblance to Scarlett that went beyond typical sibling similarities. The same eyes, the same bone structure, the same way of tilting her head when she was thinking. "What kind of things?" I asked. Iris took a deep breath. "What if I told you that Scarlett and I aren't really sisters? What if I told you that the Pemberton family's perfect reputation is built on a lie they've been telling for 22 years? My mind started racing. "Keep talking." "Scarlett was 16 when she got pregnant. My parents sent her away for a year, told everyone she was studying abroad. When she came back, they claimed they'd adopted me from a distant relative who died in a car accident. The revelation hit me like a punch to the gut. You're Scarlett's daughter, and she doesn't know that I know," Iris continued. "But I've known for years. I found the birth certificate, the hospital records, everything my parents thought they'd hidden." I sat down heavily on one of the shop's chairs. "Why are you telling me this?" "Because my parents are using this secret to control her. They've threatened to expose everything if she doesn't marry someone they approve of. But they don't know that their biggest weapon against her could also be their biggest weakness." "What do you mean?" Iris smiled, And for the first time since this nightmare began, I saw a glimmer of hope. Because if this story comes out the right way, it doesn't just hurt Scarlett. It destroys my grandparents' reputation, their business relationships, their standing in the community. They've built their lives on appearing morally superior to everyone else. I understood immediately. Mutually assured destruction. Exactly. They can't use this against Scarlett without destroying themselves. I spent 3 sleepless nights planning my next move. Iris had given me a nuclear weapon, but using it would hurt Scarlett as much as her parents. I needed to find a way to end their campaign against me without destroying the woman I still loved. The opportunity came when Patricia Pemberton made a mistake. She scheduled a meeting with the City Planning Commission to officially complain about my shop's zoning, thinking she could pressure them into shutting me down. What she didn't know was that Marcus Thompson had connections throughout the city government. The hearing is Thursday at 2 p.m., Marcus told me. She's planning to bring character witnesses, documentation about your unsuitability as a business owner. It's going to be a circus. Good, I said, surprising him with my calm tone. I wanted to be public. Thursday arrived gray and rainy, matching my mood perfectly. The City Hall meeting room was packed with people I recognized from the society pages, Patricia's army of influential friends, ready to watch her deliver the killing blow to my business. I sat alone at the respondents' table, wearing my best suit and carrying a manila folder that I hoped I wouldn't need to open. Patricia presented her case with theatrical flair, painting me as a dangerous element in an otherwise respectable neighborhood. This establishment, she declared to the commission, attracts the wrong sort of clientele: drug users, criminals, people with no respect for community standards. When it was my turn to respond, I stood up slowly and looked directly at Patricia. Commissioners, Mrs. Pemberton is correct that I serve a diverse clientele. Veterans dealing with PTSD who find healing through art. Cancer survivors marking their recovery with meaningful tattoos. Artists and musicians who've made Portland the creative city it is today. I paused, letting that sink in before continuing. But this hearing isn't really about zoning or business permits. This is about a wealthy family trying to destroy a small business owner because their daughter chose to love beneath her station. Patricia's face turned red. How dare you? I'm not finished, I said firmly, my voice carrying across the room. Mrs. Pemberton's family has built their reputation on appearing morally superior to the rest of us. But what if that reputation was based on lies? I held up the manila folder. I have information about the Pemberton family that would be very interesting to this community. Information about secrets they've kept hidden for over 20 years. The color drained from Patricia's face. Behind her, I could see Scarlett in the audience, her eyes wide with understanding and fear. However, I continued, setting the folder back down without opening it. I'm not going to use it. Because unlike some people in this room, I don't believe in destroying families to win arguments. I looked directly at Patricia. Your campaign against me ends today. The fake reviews disappear, the harassment stops, the legal challenges go away. In return, your family's secrets stay secret. And if I refuse? Patricia asked, her voice barely audible. Then tomorrow morning, every newspaper and blog in Portland gets a very interesting story about teen pregnancy, cover-ups, and the lies that Portland's elite tell to protect their reputations. The room was dead silent. Patricia stared at me for a long moment, clearly calculating her options. Finally, she gathered her papers and purse. This hearing is unnecessary, she announced to the commission. I'm withdrawing my complaint. As she walked toward the exit, she paused beside my table. This isn't over, Mr. Blackwell. Yes, it is, I replied quietly. Unless you wanted to be. After she left, I sat in the empty meeting room for a few minutes, feeling something I hadn't experienced in weeks. Peace. I'd won, but it felt hollow. The woman I loved was still lost to me, still trapped by her family's expectations and secrets. But at least now I could rebuild my life without looking over my shoulder. 6 months later, my life had settled into a new rhythm. The shop was thriving. The publicity from the Pemberton scandal had actually brought in more customers who respected what I'd stood for. I'd hired 2 more artists and expanded into the adjacent storefront. Iris had become a regular fixture around the shop, helping with the business side while finishing her art degree. She was brilliant with social media and had been instrumental in rebuilding our reputation after a family smear campaign. You know she thinks about you, Iris said one evening as we were closing up. Scarlett, she asks about you sometimes when she thinks I'm not listening. I looked up from counting the day's receipts. How's she doing? Miserable. She's engaged to some lawyer from Seattle now. Dad's choice, obviously. The wedding's in 3 months. I felt a familiar ache in my chest, but it was duller now, manageable. Good for her. I hope she's happy. Iris gave me a look that suggested she didn't believe my casual tone any more than I did. That Thursday, Scarlett walked into my shop for the first time since the failed proposal. She looked older, more tired, but still beautiful. I was working on a client's back piece when she arrived, so she waited quietly in the corner, watching me work. Can we talk? She asked after my client left. We went to my office in the back. She sat across from my desk, fidgeting with her engagement ring, a massive diamond that probably cost more than my car. I'm getting married in 2 months, she said without preamble. Congratulations. I don't love him. I set down my pen and looked at her directly. Then why are you marrying him? Because I'm tired of fighting. Because it's easier to give them what they want than to keep battling for what I want. And what do you want, Scarlett? She was quiet for a long moment. I want to go back to that night in the park and say yes. I want to undo the biggest mistake of my life. I felt my heart start a race, but I kept my voice steady. You can't change the past. No, but I can change the future. She took off her engagement ring and set it on my desk. I'm calling off the wedding. I'm done letting my parents control my life. What about your inheritance? Your family's approval? She smiled, and for the first time in months, it looked genuine. Iris helped me understand something. Family isn't about money or approval. It's about love and support. I'd rather have her as my only family than live a lie with people who've never really loved me for who I am. I stared at the ring sitting on my desk, then at the woman I'd never stopped loving. Scarlett, what are you asking me? I'm asking if you'll give me another chance. If you'll let me prove that I choose you over everything else. I thought about the months of pain, the public humiliation, the way she'd broken my heart in that park. Then I thought about the woman sitting across from me, finally ready to fight for what she wanted. The ring is still at Frank Morrison's, I said quietly. Her face lit up like sunrise. We were married 6 months later in a small ceremony at the shop, surrounded by artists, musicians, and the kind of people who'd become our real family. Frank Morrison gave Scarlett away, since her parents had officially disowned her after she broke off her engagement to the Seattle lawyer. Iris was Scarlett's maid of honor, and she'd legally changed her last name to distance herself from the Pemberton family. She was planning a transfer to Portland State, so she could stay close to us while finishing her degree. Do you ever regret it? I asked Scarlett on our wedding night, as we sat in our small apartment above the shop. Giving up all that money, that lifestyle. She looked around at our modest home, secondhand furniture, walls covered with local artwork, shelves full of books and vinyl records. This is the first place I've ever lived that actually feels like home. The Pemberton family never spoke to us again, which was fine by both of us. Patricia's reputation in Portland society had taken a serious hit when word got out about how she'd tried to destroy my business. Several of her charitable organizations quietly asked her to step down from leadership roles. A year later, Iris discovered she was pregnant, not from any scandal, but from her relationship with Tommy, one of my tattoo artists. Scarlett was over the moon about becoming an aunt or grandmother, depending on how you looked at it. The family secret that had once been used to control and shame them had become something they celebrated openly. I have news, Scarlett announced one morning as I was opening the shop. Good news and interesting news. Let's hear it. The good news is that Morrison's called. The custom wedding rings we ordered are ready. We decided on simple matching bands with small diamonds. Nothing flashy, just solid and beautiful like the relationship we built. And the interesting news? Scarlett grinned. My grandmother left me a trust fund that my parents can't touch. Apparently, she never approved of how they treated people, and she made sure I'd have independence if I ever needed it. I laughed, shaking my head. So we're rich now. Rich enough to expand a shop, maybe open a second location. Rich enough to help Iris finish school without worrying about money. Rich enough to build something lasting. I pulled her close and kissed her forehead. We were already rich, Scarlett. Everything else is just bonus. 5 years later, we owned 3 tattoo parlors across Portland. Iris had her art degree and was managing our newest location, and Scarlett was pregnant with our first child. We'd built something real together. A business, a family, a life based on truth instead of appearances. Sometimes I think about that night in the park when she first rejected my proposal. It was the worst night of my life, but it was also the beginning of the best chapter. If she'd said yes that first time, we might have had a marriage built on her fear of disappointing her family. Instead, we got something better. A partnership between two people who chose each other over everything else the world had to offer. That's worth more than all the Pemberton money could ever buy.